far from the landmarks of home. Of course, my story, like any good story, is also the story of events and circumstances and other people as well, including a pair of old-timers who liked to sit in rocking chairs in front of an old mercantile store in North Carolina. Most important, it's the story of two different women, though one was really just a girl at the time. I'm the first to notice that when others tell their stories, they tend to frame them in ways that make them the star. I'll probably fall into the same trap, but I'd like to offer the caveat that most of the events still strike me as accidental. Throughout my telling, please remember that I regard myself as no kind of hero. As for the ending of this story, I suppose this wedding is a coda of sorts. 5 years ago, I would have been hard-pressed to say whether the conclusion of these intertwining tales was a happy, tragic, or bittersweet one. And now, frankly, I'm even less certain, as I've come here wondering whether the story might in some winding fashion pick up exactly where it left off. To understand what I mean, you'll have to travel back in time with me, to revisit a world that, despite all that has happened in the intervening years, still feels close enough to touch. Chapter 1, 2014. I first noticed the girl walking past my house the day after I'd moved in. Over the next month and a half, I saw her shuffle by a few times a week, head down and shoulders hunched. For a long time, neither of us said a word to each other. I suspected she was in her teens. Something about the way she carried herself suggested she was struggling beneath the twin burdens of low self-esteem and irritation at the world. But at 32, I'd reached the age where it was almost impossible for me to tell. Aside from noting her long brown hair and wide-set eyes, the only thing I knew for sure about her was that she lived in the trailer park up the road and that she liked to walk. Or more likely, she had to walk because she didn't own a car. The April skies were clear, the temperature hovering in the low 70s, with just enough breeze to carry the perfumed aroma of flowers. The dogwoods and azaleas in the yard had roared into bloom almost overnight, framing the gravel road that wound past my grandfather's house, just outside New Bern, North Carolina, a place I'd recently inherited. And I, Trevor Benson, convalescing physician and disabled veteran by profession, was shaking mothballs from a box along the base of the front porch, lamenting that it wasn't how I'd planned to spend my morning. The problem with doing chores around the house was never knowing quite when you might be finished, since there was always something else that needed to be done, or whether fixing up the old place was even worthwhile at all. The house, and I used the term loosely, wasn't much by way of appearance, and the years had taken their toll. My grandfather built it himself after returning from World War II, and though he could build things to last, he didn't have a lot of talent when it came to design. The house was a rectangle, with porches on the front and back, 2 bedrooms, kitchen, family room, and 2 bathrooms. The cedar siding had faded to a grayish silver over the years, mimicking my grandfather's hair. The roof had been patched. Air seeped through the windows, and the kitchen floor slanted to the point that if liquid spilled, it became a tiny river that flowed to the door that led to the back porch. I like to think it made cleaning up easier for my grandfather, who'd lived by himself the last 30 years of his life. The property, however, was special. It was a shade over 6 acres, with an aging, slightly tilting barn and a honey shed where my grandfather harvested his honey, and dotted with seemingly every flowering plant known to mankind, including clover patches and wildflowers. From now until the end of summer, the property would resemble a ground-level fireworks display. It was also situated on Bryce's Creek, where dark, brackish water flowed so slowly that it often reflected the sky like a mirror. Sunsets turned the creek into a cacophony of burgundy and red and orange and yellow, while the slowly fading rays pierced the curtain of Spanish moss draped over the tree branches. The honeybees loved the place, which had been my grandfather's intent, since I'm pretty sure he loved bees more than people. There were about 20 beehives on the property. He'd been a part-time apiary.